Hello and welcome to this HTA Interest Group webinar, Regulatory Updates on Harmonization of HTA among Medical Devices and Digital Medicine. As we wait for a few minutes for further participants to join, I will share a few slides with you about the Society. This webinar is brought to you by the HTA Medical Device Interest Group. HTA is the only global society championing equitable, responsive, and cutting-edge health technology assessment. HTA membership holds many benefits, including HTI's premier events and specialized interest group, free online access to the International Journal of Technology Assessment in Healthcare, HTI resources and news, full access to the HTI educational author database, a community that is dreaming, shaping, and championing the future of HTA. For more information on membership benefits, visit our membership pages on our website. HTA interest groups are open to all members of HTA. They act as a forum for HTA members to network, exchange information, and collaborate on projects of mutual interest throughout the year. Visit the HTA website for more information on our interest group. The next HTA 2024 annual meeting will take place in Seville, Spain, from June 15 to 19th. For more information, please visit the event website, www.hti2024.org. We kindly ask participants to remain muted until invited to ask questions. Alternatively, please submit any question through the Q&A function of the Zoom meeting platform. You can view the agenda for today's webinar here. And thank you again for joining us today. I will now hand over to the Medical Device Interest Group to formally welcome and introduce today's topic. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today's webinar. My name is Jarno Suominen, and I have started as the Technical Officer in February in this interest group. My background is in biomedical engineering and life sciences. Our co-chair Anastasia will kindly introduce herself as our webinar keeps rolling. Next slide, please. Please, Anastasia.
Hey everyone, thank you for attending today. We have a very topical topic for discussion today. Myself and Richard are the two co-chairs of the Medical Devices Interest Group. Richard unfortunately couldn't attend today, so he has sent his apologies, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Anastasia. And if we move on to the next slide, and before we move to the topic, we would like to introduce the background of the Medical Devices Interest Group. As Nicola already shared us a big background about the organization in general, the Medical Devices Interest Group was established 4 years ago, and we have doubled our memberships this year, and currently we have more than 300 members in this interest group. If we continue with the slides, our aim is to advance the dialogue between evidence-based policymaking and HTA methods among medical devices. And in our advisory board, there are representatives from multiple international organizations. And next, few words about our interest group. Our mission is to promote the role of medical technology to enable the holistic shift of healthcare systems towards the key principle of value-based healthcare. Firstly, our goals are to produce objective and relevant research to improve and inform policymaking that is intended to improve population health. Secondly, we have the advance of dialogue on evidence-based policymaking and medical device HTA methods. And last but not for least, thirdly, our aim is to reflect the stakeholder groups and consider the HTA role in policy discussion. And now we are moving forward to the stake of our webinar, a short introduction just before we get the stage with our guests. Today's webinar, we are focusing on the regulatory updates on harmonization of HTA among medical devices and digital medicine, and on regulatory basis, the safety, performance, risk, and benefits of medical devices are strongly regulated before market access. Strong regulation-based approach can create the impression that the market-penetrated solutions are uniformly applicable. However, market access in itself doesn't guarantee the effectiveness of the device. Same applies to the wellness technology, in which regulation is clearly at a lower level compared to medical devices. In addition, to assess and qualify digital solutions, the need for harmonization of assessment criteria is essential, so the open market is not siloed between the countries. So it is a shared interest of manufacturers, users, and assessment bodies that digital solutions are evaluated with uniform criteria to support decision-making while taking into account the needs of technology companies and citizens. Around this topic, we are honored to introduce our webinar panelists, Petra Hohendohr and Marco Marchetti. And first on the go, we are diving into the ISO 82304/2 with Petra, and short introductions about Petra and her background. Petra is the lead expert of the standard preparation and implementation, an assignment from European Commission that went global in its cooperation with the International Standardization Organization. Petra currently coordinates the Horizon Europe Label to Enable project that supports the implementation of the standard, which was inspired by the EU Energy Label, Nutri-Score front of back nutrition label, and FDA over-the-counter medicine label. The project includes an ISO compliant certification scheme, which is tested with 24 internally very diverse health apps. Other tasks include a series of roundtable for health authorities, HTA bodies, and insurers to explore the value of the standard in decision-making on reimbursement of health apps, and a detailed comparison of the standard EUNet HTA core model and several national assessment framework. Please, Petra, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Jarno. I'll guide you through a bit more on Label to Enable and SEN ISO 82304 Part 2. And if okay, I can move the slides, please. Yeah. So what is our task? This is what you get when you type in diabetes in the App Store. How do you distinguish a good health app? And research shows that the order of the apps doesn't say anything about quality. The description may sound very scientific, but it doesn't mean anything. And also the user reviews are not distinctive of quality. Next slide, please. So the EU saw the same thing, and they introduced in 2014 the Green Paper on Mobile Health, and questions: how do we verify or ensure the efficacy of health apps, and how do we better inform users on the quality of these apps? Later, the digital single market transformation of health and care was introduced. The Commission also started SEN ISO 82304 Part 2. Currently, the European Health Data Space, which calls for a voluntary, or lately it seems mandatory, labeling of wellness apps and the cascading effect in medical devices. And afterwards, the Horizon Europe project Label to Enable, that I'll tell you a bit more about. We're creating an ISO 17067 EU certification scheme for 82304 Part 2. That is to issue the trusted health and quality label, scores, and report. Next slide. So this is the draft regulation, although a new one came out last week from the NVLIBE committee that changed a few things, making labeling mandatory and deciding and implementing legislation on the label itself. Next slide. It refers to Annex 2, and as you can see here, there's quite nice overlap with the health web quality label that I'll introduce in a bit more detail in a bit. So healthy and safe, easy to use, secure data, and robust builds. Next slide. And interesting about the latest version is that this is the definition of a wellness application, and all the parts in green are exactly A2304 part 2. So software intended to be used specifically for managing, maintaining, or improving health of individual persons or the delivery of care. And the blue ones are the ones that were added in the new draft European Health Data Space. Next slide. If you can click again, you can see on the left the health web quality score, which relates, if you click again, to the health web quality label. And if you click again, you have another example. So we're the EU energy label, but then for health apps. Next slide. Which then gets more detail in a health app quality report, of which this is a first draft. And next slide, and then I'll have a number of clicks. So it's similar to the EU energy label. If you click, you have a score, which relates to a label, which again relates to a report. Next slide. The report was skipped. But there's more detailed report. And of course, we're trying to obtain the similar type of effects as the EU energy label. And here you can see how quality, in this case of energy efficiency, positively evolves over the years for, on the left, refrigerator, and on the right, washing machine sale. And if you click to the next slide, then you can see that this is actually a win-win-win-win-win. So the planet wins, there's less consumption, but we all also win with 210 euros per household and a lot of business revenue and jobs created as well. So this is for the energy label, but as mentioned, we're trying to obtain similar things. Next slide. So this is ISO TS 82304 part 2. On the left, the full label, which has the app icon, as you can see in the App Store, app name, which platforms it's on. So App Store, Google Play Store, website, who created it, what's the benefit of the app, the intended use, the intended users. When do you first see a healthcare professional before using an app? And then the 4 different quality aspects, so healthy and safe, easy to use, secure data, and robust build, which add up to an overall health app quality score. And then when was it last checked, knowing that apps evolve over time. It covers both health and wellness, so medical device apps and wellness apps, but we're not duplicating the work of the notified body in case of Class 2A medical devices or Class 2B or Class 3. It was tested with people with low health literacy. We're doing that now actually in total 5 countries in Europe and creating communication around it. Creating the quality in a glance to the needed detail. And at the back of this are 81 questions, of which 67 are score impacting. If a manufacturer answers, yes, I have this quality requirement, they need to deliver the evidence, which is then assessed by app assessors. Funded in a Delphi study with 83 experts and maintained by Sensenelec, ISO, and IEC, who are, by the way, also behind the EU energy label. Next slide. And these are the different elements behind healthy and safe, which is 50% of the overall score. And you could see the other scores as well. So different elements covered in the label. Next slide. So we're intentionally very, very multi-stakeholder. And as you can see in this slide, we need all the different stakeholders to make this work. How we need manufacturers to build and improve the quality of apps. We need app checkers to certify them, app stores to display the label. And yes, we already have contact with them. Healthcare professionals, what do they need? And the patient citizens. And then, of course, the healthcare systems and authorities. Next slide. So intentionally multi-stakeholder is our consortium. Next slide. But also we started already in the development with eight different stakeholders on board, and this was the very detailed, elaborate way in which we created 82304 part 2. Next slide. This is how we're creating currently a certification scheme. So at the back of it, we're testing with 24 different health apps, but at the back of it, we are again going back to the different stakeholders, seeing, okay, if this is what we assess, is that what you actually need? The level of detail, the rigor that you're looking for, is that what you need to be able to make decisions? Next slide. And we're looking ahead. What is multi-stakeholder success in 5 to 10 years of labeling, in which you can see as well, it's both health systems and manufacturers and healthcare professionals and citizens, patients, that we are looking at what needs to happen. Next slide. So choosing a good health app is difficult. This is what patients and carers said. There are so many health apps. I don't know. I'm not sure they will help me. I'm not sure they're relevant to me. And who actually makes them? I'm suspicious. Let's not. Next slide. We saw a bit the same thing. So we did a survey with 1,228 people, and 86%, over 86% of them said, yes, we would like the government to review and rate health apps to help us choose. Or pay another organization to do so. Next slide. In Australia, they asked, who do you trust most to give you recommendations on health apps? And then people said, well, my GP. And then the GP said, well, I don't know either what a good health app is, and I lack a trustworthy source, so I'm refraining from recommendations. And we actually see a bit the same in Europe. Next slide. But so we did the same ask as well here to patients and citizens. So 1,228 respondents again. Who do you trust most? Again, the healthcare professional and the pharmacist as a next step. But next slide, when we asked them, and whose advice do you use? Then family and friends and app stores were much higher than their actual trust levels. So there's things we can still do there. Next slide. We also did research with healthcare professionals. Half of them had a situation with a label, half without a label, and we asked them about their willingness to recommend health apps to different types of patients. So here, low CES, high CES patients, social economic status, and next slide, different types of health apps, so prevention, self-management, and healthcare. And in all cases, they were more likely to, or more willing to recommend a health app with a label. Next slide. So if you're manufacturing, then delivering a good health app is quite difficult as well. So on the left, a picture of the mHealth Hub, which was a European project as well, of different health app assessment frameworks in Europe. So how do you comply with all of them? And if you click again, if you'd like to get reimbursed, then there's the challenge too. If you can click again, the most well-known is Germany with their DIGA regulation. The green ones are currently reimbursed at a longer term. The ones without are temporarily reimbursed. If you click again, Belgium was considered a second one. If you click again, they had one app reimbursed, and click again, that framework is no longer there. And France, if you can click again, has recently started with the BICOM. So that's quite a challenge. If you're, next slide, if you're an authority, it can be quite difficult to review a health app. And these were 9 different countries, of which 7 in Europe, in a Nature article, which concluded that even the ones that are far along, mentioning Belgium, Germany, and the UK, they're struggling with efficient implementation, and we need cross-national efforts. Next slide. So this is what we're doing. We're trying to, one of the things that we're doing now is creating a certification scheme. We're starting with the 82.304 Part 2 requirements. We have subject matter experts. As you can see, healthy and safe is very different from easy to use. We look into EU level legislation, standardization, research findings, and common practice, and that decides what is our assessment method. How do we train assessors? What do they need to know? What is our pass-fail? So what is sufficient evidence? When do we reassess? How do we do surveillance? When do we withdraw a label? And we're testing that with 24 different health apps, looking into each app gets assessed by 2 different app assessors from 2 different countries. Are their outcomes consistent? And thus show that you don't need to duplicate the effort in different countries. Is it efficient and is it self-explanatory? And then we go back to the larger group saying, okay, if this is what we do, does that satisfy your needs? Next slide. So we're comparing currently SENISO 82304 Part 2 UNETA core model, the DIGA DAC DTEC, so that's the UK, Finland, France, and the Netherlands. If you click again, and we saw in the comparison of the first 2 that there are 4 different requirements that matter most, the key ones. So health risks, ethical challenges, health benefit, and societal benefit. Next slide. And we're comparing in more detail what are the actual requirements on a topic level. We'll go into a sub-level, inquiring into what is pass-fail, when you reassess, etc., and finding out what is context-specific. So things that are national legislation or interoperability with the national systems, or are you registered with the national authority, or those types of things are currently context-specific. Next slide. And we've actually seen the same thing. This is the Australian government. They recently launched their framework, which indeed shows that they built on 82304 Part 2. If you already have an 82304 Part 2 assessment, then there's a streamlined assessment. So this seems to prove that this is actually possible. And my message is I'd like to be the 80, 90, 95% that everybody agrees about is quality. And then you only need to do the 10, 15, 20%. Perhaps that remains. Next slide. So we're testing with 24 different apps. We're quite far ahead now. Only the last 3 or 4 or 5 need to be done. We've done some research on willingness to pay, because if you do third-party assessment, who's going to pay the bill? These are initial results from health system representatives. So we had 46 of them. They said we'd be willing to pay around 7,000 euros if there is a large increase in willingness to use assessed apps. Next slide. Health app developers said, well, we are willing to pay if there is a clear result in guideline integration, or chances that it will be integrated in guidelines and reimbursement. Next slide. We're looking into what are currently the challenges into health and wellness apps rarely being reimbursed. We're doing a series of 3 different roundtables. We had the first 2 looking at the challenges with HTA bodies, insurers, and authorities, looking at the solutions. And next time we'll look into the recommendations. Next slide. That next roundtable will be February 13, and you're very welcome to join. If you'd like to, please leave your email address in the chat. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Petra. That was very interesting. Do we have approximately 5-6 minutes before we go into the next presentation? So do we have any questions for Petra from participants? I can start with one on my end, Petra, because I guess one of the things that I was thinking when you're presenting, and you started by outlining the volume of apps and choices available. So obviously when it comes to assessing them once, that's already a big task. But then you mentioned about reassessment and surveillance and keeping it live and up to date. So can I have your thoughts about how much work do we think that is, and what is the current thinking about where that resource to continually make sure that the content is up to date, where that resource will come from?
Yeah, we're currently creating the certification scheme, and part of that certification scheme is also when do you reassess an app and how do you evolve the scheme itself as well, knowing that technology evolves and legislation evolves and test methods evolve. And we're now thinking about having on an annual basis a new scheme, which will slightly change, but it could also be that some of the evidence expires and then you need to redo it. In our certification scheme, we're now testing with 5 different app assessment organizations from 5 different countries, looking into their differences, trying to scale as well, having more app assessment organizations on board towards the future. But moreover, I think one of the interesting things would be what can we assess in an automated way. So the quickest way of assessing it is if we only need to authenticate something that's already been done. A second one is what can we automate? And in the end, when it comes to what is the pace at which things will be redone, we're looking at as well what is common practice, these 5 different frameworks that I mentioned, and we will go back to the stakeholders saying, well, what is the frequency where you feel comfortable with as well, because in the end we're doing it for somebody else and not just to police ourselves.
Yes, thank you. Any questions from the audience? I don't see anything else in the chat.
There is one question from Kathleen Harkin.
Sorry, Nicola, I missed that.
She'd like to join the reimbursement.
Oh yeah, we have two people, but obviously responding to your call, Petra, for joining your roundtable. So I think we can note that. We have Mangali.
Yes, I hope you can hear me because I
Yeah,
had
we
to
can
take
hear
it
you.
on the phone. Sorry, and sorry if I ask a question that I maybe misunderstood, but in the last few slides that you saw, did I understand it well that one could choose on which items to be assessed? Did I understand it well, or is it an assessment would go to certain fixed items of assessment? Because that wasn't completely clear to me.
So, well, we're creating a scheme for 82304 Part 2, not in parts, but in full. But it might be that you need to reassess only parts at some point in time. So not do the full thing every time, but see what needs to be reassessed and when.
Okay, and that will be indicated by the assessors, I suppose.
Yeah, in part. Well, it's in part the assessors who so if certain evidence expires, then you need to upload new evidence. But it could also be that there's a significant change of the app, and then there's an effort at the part of the manufacturer as well, I imagine, unless we start using more the automated possibilities of seeing, at least for Google Play Store and App Store, that there are updates and being able to find out that there is a significant change.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Petra. We have 2 more follow-up questions from Kathleen. One is how it will be determined who conducts those assessments, if there are any criteria there, who makes that choice. And I guess, will the evidence underlying the assessment be made publicly available, I guess, eventually, either real time or eventually?
Well, we are looking into now with the healthcare professionals advisory board that we have is what is the level of detail they need beyond yes, no to individual questions to feel comfortable recommending apps. Creating also an evidence pack, and part of that evidence pack will be something that the manufacturers will not want to disclose because of commercial reasons, for example, or safety reasons. So we need to look at what's the level of detail that will be provided beyond the yes, no. But that's also feasible for the manufacturers.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll pause here with the questions. We might have a bit more time at the end after Marco finishes his presentation. Please continue, send them through if you have them. Jarno, back to you for the introductions for Marco and his presentation.
Thank you very much, Petra and Anastasia, and all the participants for your questions. As we continue, we are diving into the Health Technology Assessment Regulation with Marco Marchetti. And as an introduction, Marco is the leading expert of the medical devices division in the preparation of the health technology assessment regulation in Europe. He's also part of board of directors in Health Technology Assessment International, and Marco has participated since the beginning to the activities of the European Network of Health Technology Assessment. Please, Marco, the stage is yours.
So thanks a lot for the invitation. Can I have my slide, please? Okay, perfect. Okay, next one, please. Okay, perfect. As as Billy just anticipated, I'm co-chairing the HTA Member State Coordination Group with the specific expertise on medical devices. And now my quick presentation is focused at the objectives to explain what are the main characteristic of this regulation. If you can go to the next one, next slide, please. So next one. Just to start with what is an premise in the HTR, that the objectives of this HTA approach to the European level is to promote innovation and to make feasible to bring technology innovation in a very fast way, those technology innovation that is really effective to the patient, and trying to improve proper application of this technology, also with the objective to maintain the economic financial sustainability of the system. So even if the responsibility of the system, of the price reimbursement is on top of the national responsibility, the objective to regulation is to harmonize the way to evaluate apart the dimension of the HTA, as we can see later. Next slide, please. So what are foreseen? Foreseen by the regulation that the objective is to create a framework in which different member states, all member states in Europe, are able to share, to harmonize their way to proceed to the evaluates of different technology. So also to share, to provide us just one unique mechanism for laying down any kind of information, just to anticipate that, for example, the regulation for this is if you are a manufacturer that you are produce a specific documentation at the European level, in member states are not available, and it's not possible for member state to request again the same kind of information, with the exception they can request further information that probably are related to the local context. To define common methodology, one of the pillars on which is based the regulation is that the regulation is not going into the evaluation of what is called the added therapeutic value. So it means that the HTA approach, the European level, is mainly focused on evaluating effectiveness and safety. The next slide, please. This regulation comes from a long story that has been started in 2024 when the European Union has defined HTA as one of the priority for the development of the European Union, and from that point has been started a series of grants, initially research grant, after with a form of joint action that have had the objective to create the basis for a further evolution that has been then to the regulation. So to start, firstly, to create a network among HTA bodies all over Europe, to create the common framework for evaluation. So, the common the core model that has been developed by the European Network of Technology Assessment at the beginning has been also mentioned in the previous presentation. So this is actually the base on which then the regulation has been founded. The activities of the UNETA has been terminated in September of this year, 2023, and now the big change is that we actually are in a legislative framework that is completely different for the previous approach. This is a more research approach. Next slide, please. I'm showing this slide because it include a very important messages. So actually, in this picture, we were in the European Medicine Agency headquarters in Amsterdam. There has been the last bilateral meeting of UNETA and the EMA. What is the reason? Because I'm showing you this picture, because the objective of this regulation is to is a part of what I can call the European strategies for health that foresee the creation of a really well interconnected system among all different European institutions. So EMA, Member State, and European Commission. Next slide, please. Now going into some detail of the regulation, this is a very particular regulation because generally the regulation is managed by the Commission. This regulation instead is managed by the Member State. This is probably the first example of what is being called co-legislation, in the sense that during the negotiation of the regulation, the decision was that the responsibility to implement the regulation is not on top of the European Commission, but it was on top of the Member State. Through what has been called Member State Coordination Group, that is the body that has the responsibility to implement the regulation. What does it mean to implement? To implement and apply the regulation. What does it mean? This? It means that now we are working as coordination group on the procedure and methods for establishing the joint work, HTA joint work. We are going to better detail in the latest slide. And starting from January 2025, when the regulation became operative, coordination group is the place in which decisions are taken in respect to which kind of technology to evaluate, the procedure, and the agreement with respect to the result of the joint activities of the HTA regulation. After the approval of the coordination group, the joint clinical assessment, that one of the products of this joint work will be transmitted to the Member State, because they have to take into consideration this joint work, joint clinical assessment, when they're going to implement the own national procedure, national decision-making process. Next slide, please. What is the focus and the field of application of the regulation? As I mentioned at the beginning, the focus is on the first two dimensions of the HTA, so the relative effectiveness and the safety. I've underlined the terms relative in the sense that we are out of what is the regulatory process for the introduction into the market. So we are not talking about the regulatory process of EMA. We are not talking about the CE mark for medical devices. We are talking something that is coming later. But in this case, as I trying to show you is happening in parallel in the meantime with the regulatory process. Joint clinical assessment, and that are one of the activities at the European level. So we'll be focused on the relative effectiveness and safety. Instead, the national, on top of the national responsibility, will be the other domain of the HTA. So the impact on the organization, the economic impact, social, and ethical impact. The field of application are both from pharmaceutical product and medical devices. For medical device, for pharmaceutical product, there is a stepwise approach that foresee that regulation has been entered into force in January 2002, has been approved in December 2021. The regulation foresee time for implementation until January 2025. From January 2025, joint clinical assessment and joint scientific consultation, that are the two main activities foreseen by the regulation, will start. For pharmaceutical, for oncologic product, ATMP from January 2005, for rare disease pharmaceutical drugs in January 2028, and for all the product for starting from January 2030. Because it means that every new drugs that will be launched into the market and that will be applied for the EMA approval process starting from January 12 of January 2025 will enter in this joint HTA activities at the European level with this stepwise approach, as I mentioned before, and the process will be in parallel among the EMA process and HTA process, and this is being declined in a more precise way in one of the implementing act on joint clinical assessment. In this case, on pharmaceutical, that actually is an ongoing work among the Commission and the Member State. On medical devices, not every medical devices obviously are going under this regulation. The medical devices that are going under this regulation are the class 2B that are providing or removing pharmaceuticals, and the class 3 implantable devices. Also in this case, the regulation doesn't foresee a specific stepwise approach. Has been this implicate that from January 2005, the evaluation activity is supposed to be started, and as I show you later in the next slide, in the last meeting of the coordination group that we have had on November, a couple of weeks ago, we exactly defining the timing of the application of medical devices, that is 2025 for joint scientific consultation and 2026 for joint clinical assessment. According to, what is foreseen in terms of implementation act, both for scientific consultation and both for joint clinical assessment. Next slide, please. This is just to show that what we are doing now, the topic of our work now is the first year, 2022 has been passed trying to build the governance structure of the regulations. So has been established the coordination group. In November has been elected the chair and the co-chair of the coordination group, and we started to work in an operative way in January 2003. Now we are establishing all procedures, methods that permit us to start with this joint work in 2025, according to the timeline for medical devices and pharmaceutical products that I explained just before. Next slide, please. This is the governance structure. I already explained you that the member state coordination group is the body that is managing the implementation and application of the regulation. The member state has been foreseen by the regulation that is acting in two different configurations, one for pharmaceutical and one for medical devices. But in the end of 2022, in November 2022, there has been a decision by the two configuration of the member state coordination group to act in the first 2 years of application of the regulation in what has been called joint one configuration, because we realized at the beginning that probably there is many part of the work that is common both for pharmaceutical, for drugs, and both for medical devices, and so At the beginning, the decision was to try to look what is can be shared and how we can manage this one. This joint configuration, one joint configuration, will be rediscussed in the mid of 2024, according to the experience that we had in the meantime, how to proceed, how to work respect to regulation. The Commission, what is the role of the Commission? Before I mentioned that this is a co-legislation in which, differently from the other regulation, the managing of the is not on top on the Commission. Commission have the duty to support the Member State coordination group from an administrative and technical point of view, and providing a very an ICT platform that will be the only contact point for all the process of the joint work in the European level, for the HTV developers, for the coordination group, for the member state, for the assessor and co-assessor, for the European Medicine Agency, and also for the stakeholder. Because another important pillar of the regulation is the HTA stakeholder network. That is the place in which coordination group can discuss with the stakeholder respect methods, procedure, way to approach different specific topic. This is one of the pillar of the regulation. Next slide, please. What is important now is that there is the needs to inform not only the HTA bodies, but all the stakeholders, also the national level, or of what it foresee is incoming in the next 1 year, because now we are, missing just 13 months respect to the start of the real application of the regulation. So this is the reason, because the Commission has foresee a series of info day in different member states. 7 info days as foresee, if I remember well. The last one, the third one, and the last one in terms of time has been in Seville, and it was dedicated to Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Malta. And we have had 100 stakeholders coming from these different countries, and more than 700 people connected online. And in this session, there's been the explanation of the main pillars of the regulation, and there is also a session with respect to the expectation of different HTA bodies and Minister of Health respect to what will be the impact of this regulation on the national level. And also last session of the Info Days, it was dedicated to the stakeholder, both professional, scientific society, patient association. What is the expected impact of this deregulation from the perspective in the national context? Next slide, please. Regulation is one of the primary jurisdiction in the European Union, and is foresee a series of implementing acts that are described in a very detailed way the process of joint clinical assessment, of joint scientific consultation, of the management and prevention of conflict of interest, in the exchange of information with the EMA. As you can see from the timeline that has been provided by the Commission, first implementing act we are working on. We are serial meeting now in Brussels. There is a specific committee that is called Comitology Committee that is trying to draft together with the Commission of the first implementing act that is dedicated to joint clinical assessment. So the first implementing act was expected in the Q4 2023. Probably we can have a little bit of delay, but in the first 2 months of 2024, I expect that also this implementing act will be adopted by the European Commission. As you can see, with respect to the medical devices, implementing act on medical devices are the latest to one implementing act that are foreseen Q3 2024 for joint clinical assessment for medical devices. But in the reality, I have not updated the slide, but there has been a change in terms of timing, because first we are going to have the joint scientific consultation implementing act, and then the joint clinical assessment implementing act on medical devices. Next slide, please. Just a brief focus on medical devices. As I mentioned you at the beginning, not all medical devices are going into regulation. So we are going to have class 3 implantable medical devices, class 2B active medical devices that are providing or removing pharmaceutical. All those of these medical devices are able to go into the joint clinical assessment. Those medical devices that go under a process that is called the scrutiny process. Scrutiny process is a process which notify body that have to relapse CE mark for class 3, class 2B active ARMP medical devices are providing information to the Commission that have delegated this activity to the European Medicine Agency in January 2002 to provide an opinion by the expert panel respect the risk-benefit ratio. So actually the EMA is managing a pilot on this medical devices scrutiny process. As a coordination group, we are working together with EMA for building a process that is in parallel to the expert panel process, because another pillar of the regulation is that the regulation cannot relapse, provoke a delay in the introduction of the innovation into clinical practice. So this is the reason, because we try to harmonize all different procedures. Next slide, please. This is what I mentioned just before. This is the flash report that is being approved in the decision, the decision that has been taken in the last coordination group. Two important decisions, according to my opinion. First one, a specific timeline for medical devices has been decided, so joint scientific consultation 2025. Probably according to the implementing act timing, this will start in the second part of the 2025, and secondly, joint clinical assessment 2026. Another important decision that has been taken is also to start what is foreseen at the Article 23, so voluntary cooperation. So it means that member state can decide to start to have a joint work also on different technology that are not mandatory by the regulation, and the decision was to start to that there in the list that the interest of many member states to work on digital medical devices, on real world data, and economic evaluation. So actually what we decide is to establish a working group in the coordination group that have the duty to draft what will be the procedure and the timing for this voluntary cooperation. I expect that in the next meeting of the coordination group that is planned in presence in March, if I remember well, we are going to have the first draft of the work of this working group. Next slide, please. So conclusion, I mean, this regulation, from my perspective, it's a huge occasion to improve the innovation process for medical devices. I'm not talking about pharmaceutical, because I mean, as I told you at the beginning, my expertise is specific on medical devices. And I experienced personally that there is a strong commitment also from, I mean, the majority, I can say all member states, to trying to reach an harmonization, because we realize as a member state that there is an advantages for all member states to really implement in the right timeline what is foreseen by regulation in terms of joint legal assessment, just scientific consultation. So this is my last slide. I finish my presentation. Thanks for the attention.
Thank you, Marco. That's very interesting. Do we have any questions from participants from Marco? I'll start with one. I guess the medical devices that you're gonna start looking under the joint framework, do you expect them to be essentially newcomers into the market? Are these the type of devices that you will start with?
Yes, the regulation is quite clear. So it's new devices that are obtaining new CE mark. So is the same. If we start with joint clinical assessment in 2026, we are going to start with new medical devices that are going to obtain CE mark in 2026.
Thank you. We have a question from Kathleen. Can member state HTA bodies who are not involved in the joint clinical assessment request to see the clinical evidence from the assessment group, potentially to use them for their own comparative clinical effectiveness assessment?
Decision on which kind of medical devices will be evaluated is a decision of the coordination group that can decide according to the terms of rules by majority. So this is the rules. Then the regulation foresees to nominate an assessor and a co-assessor. We are discussing how this can be interpreted in terms of person, in terms of agency. Then there is the regulation not foresee that the adoption of joint clinical assessment is not mandatory for member state, but if not, they need to explain in a very clear, transparent way the reason because they are not adopting. Also considering that they are participating in the EU joint work, for example, in define the PICO. So what is the comparator? That is one of the main critical points that has been under the discussion. So they cannot oblige. It's not mandatory to adopt, but it's mandatory to explain the reason why not.
Thank you. That was all very clear. A couple of questions from Lenny. First one, will Class D devices also be subject to the JCA? Yes. And if so, is that from 2026 onwards?
Yeah. So I forget to specify that. MDR is Class 2B and Class 3. EUDR is Class D. So it's the same starting from 2026.
I think we may have answered this already, but what is the role of the notified bodies in the JCA?
It's not all, in the sense that they have just to submit evidence information and safety information in this case, to the EMA that has been delegated by the European Commission for the scrutiny panel. EMA expert panel are providing an opinion that notified body have to take into consideration before relapse the CE mark. Those medical devices that go into this expert panel process are those medical devices that in a mandatory way are candidate to go into the joint clinical assessment.
Thank you.
But coordination group can decide further criteria of selection with respect to these medical devices.
Thank you. And Lenny, I'm just going to go straight into your final question because we kind of run out of time. It's a point about potentially duplicating efforts if both the external panel scientific advice and the joint scientific consultations both being done. Do you see potentially duplicating effort there?
Now we are working together with EMA to avoid this. So what the intention is to have we are talking about joint scientific consultation now, not joint clinical assessment. We are providing to have just a parallel advice. So, the scientific advice is on request by the HDD developers. So this is the first point. And if instead the scrutiny process that go into the expert panel is mandatory from the HTA, from the MDR regulation. But for those HDD developers that will request scientific consultation under the HTA, we are working with the EMA in order to build a parallel advice, not to duplicate information, not to duplicate effort. Information that are provided, to the expert panel are more focused on the CE mark. Information that will be provided for scientific consultation under the HTA are more focused on the relative effectiveness. So this is this is a complementary set of information.
Thank you. That was all very clear. So we've come to an end. We're going to skip the summary and the key points as we overrun a little bit for a couple of minutes. Thank you to both participants, both Marco and Petra. It was very interesting to hear and very, very clear. And thank you to all the participants for coming to join the webinar today. This will be made available online as well. You'll receive relevant information from the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation. Have a good day. Bye. Bye-bye.